This succulent is one of nature's great artworks. It is said to be closely related to Echeveria Colorata form brown tea and is a possible variation of it. Echeveria Colorata is a highly variable species endemic to Mexico. Thanks to Colorata, we now have so many amazing succulents such as the Mexican giant. Mexican giant is an absolute stunner, and once you have one, you'll be admiring it every day. And although it does look like one of those succulents that can just die for no apparent reason, it is reasonably hardy. If you're a beginner, you can certainly give it a go. Mexican giant grows huge stemless rosettes that can reach about 30 centimeters or 12 inches. In ideal conditions, they can grow slightly bigger. It has a clumping habit, and when the offsets are kept intact, it will keep spreading as long as there's enough space and nutrients. Mature clumps can measure over 50 centimeters or 20 inches. Height-wise, the rosettes can reach around 20 to 30 centimeters. The leaves are fleshy and thick with a pointy tip. They are also quite long. A very thick coating of farina covers the leaves. This white waxy substance acts like a sunscreen for succulents. The farina is also responsible for this amazingly attractive pastel color. During the growing season, the Mexican giant tends to be a light blue-gray, but once stressed, the leaves can have a pink hue. The very tip can turn a pinky red color when temperatures start dropping. This succulent is a sun lover and will grow best in a bright sunny spot outdoors. It does tolerate outdoor shade and filtered light, but is likely to not get colorful. It can grow leggy and stretched as a result. Fungal diseases are also more likely to attack when succulents are grown in shaded and humid spots. Unfortunately, Mexican giant is not suitable to be grown indoors long term and will likely eventually die unless you have a plant growing lights, a sunroom or a huge sunny window. It should, however, tolerate overwintering and short stays indoors as long as it's kept in a super bright spot. Mexican giant can be grown in pots as well as frost-free gardens. If grown in pots, repotting every year or so will ensure offsets and healthy plant. While it will tolerate being root-bound quite well, Mexican giant is prone to losing a few of the bottom leaves as a result. It may also not grow big if not given enough root space. Bigger the pot, the more giant it will grow. If you only get light frosts and no snow during winter, you can grow this succulent in the garden. To help it establish and grow better, mix any type of potting mix in with the garden soil. Echeveria roots tend to be quite thin and can find it hard to break through hard garden soil. By cultivating and mixing in a bit of potting mix, you'll add nutrients and improve the soil structure. If you want to grow the Mexican giant in the garden, it's best to choose a slope, raised beds or a spot where water doesn't pool after the rain. In pots, the best medium to use is succulent potting mix. It will have the right pH and nutrients tailored to succulent plants. As mentioned earlier, when planting in the garden, make sure to cultivate the soil. Mexican giant can be a bit prone to fungal diseases such as powdery mildew and even rot. In my experience, it can take quite a bit of rain when the potting mix is well draining and it is positioned in a sunny spot. But if it's been very humid and wet for a couple of weeks, it may start struggling a bit and even develop edema spots. All of our nursery Mexican giants are grown outdoors permanently, though I do make sure their potting mix has a bit of extra perlite for super fast drainage. But if in doubt, bring it under cover during prolonged rain. When under cover, water well once the potting mix dries up completely from previous watering. In summer, this could mean watering a few times per week and almost not at all during the cold months. Thanks to those chunky big leaves, the Mexican giant will cope very well with drought. However, it may start losing some leaves when kept dry for too long. Temperature-wise, Mexican giant will tolerate heat well over 40 degrees Celsius, though it should be moved out of the sun once it gets this hot. If exposed to direct sun during extreme heat waves, the leaves can suffer sunburn and the plant could die, especially when planted in dark-colored pots. This Echeveria is said to be frost tolerant to about -3, but is not likely to survive when frost settles for too long or when it snows. Frost cloth can be used to protect your succulents from the occasional frost, but if your climate gets snow, I'd advise to bring this plant indoors for the duration. Echeveria Mexican Giant can be propagated from seed, leaf and cuttings of offsets. Seed propagation is, in my opinion, not worth trying as it can take too long and it can be hard to find a reliable seed seller. For fast results, propagating cuttings of offsets is the best method. Mexican Giant is not particularly prolific with its offsets but does grow 3 or so each year. They can prove hard to separate and it's best to wait until they have grown a long enough stalk to cut through. Once separated, the cuttings should then be left to dry in a shady dry spot for a minimum of 24 hours. They can then be planted into pots filled with succulent potting mix and transplanted into the garden or a bigger pot once enough roots develop. First roots should start growing in 2 to 4 weeks and the plant will be ready to transplant in approximately 2 to 3 months. Now let's talk about leaf propagation. To be entirely honest, I've not had much luck myself with propagating the Mexican Giant from leaves. The first problem for me is to separate the very chunky leaves without breaking them. I found that when these types of plants are thirsty, they give up the leaves more willingly. But even when I do get the leaves off entire, they just tend not to produce many leaf babies anyway. I have been successful a few times, but more often than not, the leaves would eventually shrivel and die. As a result, I don't often bother propagating the Mexican Giant from leaves. But if you'd like to have a go, here's what I'd recommend. To get better access to the most bottom leaves, take the plant out of the pot. After separating a few, leave the leaves in a tray in a bright but shaded spot and wait for leaf babies to emerge. Once you get new growth, plant the leaves in trays or pots filled with succulent potting mix and wait a few months until the roots have grown well into the pots. In my experience, propagating is best done in spring. Summer is usually also good, but do be careful to protect your cuttings and leaves from strong sun as they burn easily. In climates where autumn and winter are mild, you can also propagate cuttings at the beginning of autumn. Personally, I stop propagating leaves by early to mid-summer so the plant has a chance to develop before winter. Mexican Giant is unfortunately susceptible to all the succulent pests. Aphids can appear in great numbers when flower stalks start growing and will not only feed off the inflorescence but can spill down on the leaves. Mealybugs are no strangers to this plant either and can attack above and below ground. Root mealybugs usually settle on root-bound plants. This is why checking on the health of the roots can be important. Bigger pests such as snails, slugs, caterpillars and grasshoppers can pose a threat too. If larger chunks go missing, one of them is likely to be the culprit. The blooms grow high above the rosette and form an arch. Each arch has about 10 individual pink and orange flowers. Here in Australia, Mexican Giant flowers at the end of winter and throughout early spring, but this can be different in other parts of the world. All Echeveria are said to be non-toxic to dogs, cats, other pets, livestock and humans. Having said that, I would not advise chopping it up into a salad just in case. And that is all for today. I hope this video was useful, and if you'd like to add anything or ask a question, you can do so in the comments below. To learn more about succulents, hit the subscribe button or go to succulentgrowingtips.com. Thank you very much for watching.